Hi everyone, we're here for lesson number 6, which is my frog stories. So this is an opportunity for me to be able to see your frog stories, and I'm super excited about this. Again, like I said in my last video, I love reading your writing, so this is something that I was really excited to make a lesson about. So our essential question of the day is, how can we use our knowledge of frogs at their egg and tadpole stages to write our own story about frogs? So if we remember, just looking back, we learned about our egg and tadpole stages. We learned, you watched that video that gave a little more information about it, and you answered some questions. So we learned that at their egg stage, they are in clumps with a bunch of other eggs in water or by water. Additionally, we learned that at the tadpole stage, they have a head, tail, body, and frogs are also vegetarian, which I had no idea about. So how can we use what we know about our frogs and tadpole stage to write about our own story of frogs? So what I did is I created a writing prompt, and it just starts off with "one day at the pond." So that your job is to fill in the story of "one day at the pond." So this means that I want you guys to show your knowledge of just one stage. You don't have to use both the stages, as long as you include the egg stage or the tadpole stage. And I can definitely challenge you guys to use both stages, but I just want to see maybe just one stage in your writing and showing your knowledge of it. So maybe showing that it's a clump, that eggs are a clump in your story, or showing that the tadpole had a head, tail, and body. So I'm going to show you guys an example of a story you could write. So I want your story to be creative and your own touch on it, but I definitely, since we're not in person, I want to be able to read you something that I wrote about it. So everyone's story is going to start off with "one day at the pond." So one day at the pond, I saw a tadpole who was minding his own business. He looked like he was beginning to grow in his legs, but he could only swim. I asked him what his name was, and he told me it was Fred. He said he was going to be a froglet soon. Before I could ask another question, he started swimming away with his brothers and sisters. At the end, I waved goodbye, and I hoped he would grow up big and strong. So here I showed my knowledge of a tadpole, because like I said, during the end of the tadpole stage, I think this was also in the video, during the end of the tadpole stage, they're beginning to grow in their legs. So I show that I knew that during that stage he's growing in his legs, but he could only swim to that point. So that's how I showed my knowledge. And then anything else I put in there, saying he's minding his own business, he was swimming with his brothers and sisters. That was just all fun to make the story fun. But I also want to show my knowledge of one of the stages within the story. So just to reiterate, like, my story, like we learned, so if you guys could think back to about 2 months ago almost, which is scary to think about, we learned about the difference between fantasy and reality. So again, fantasy is something that couldn't happen in real life. So my story is fantasy because the frog was talking to me, and obviously in real life they wouldn't have been able to talk to me, but I was still able to show my knowledge of the frog, because I did describe how an actual frog would be at the tadpole stage. So make sure your story can be a reality, for sure, or it can be a fantasy, whatever you want. But I just want to reiterate that yes, part of my stories isn't true, because he was talking to me, but the main point is to show your knowledge of the tadpole, or the frog, excuse me. So now you're going to write your own story of "one day at the pond." I'm going to attach the link to the stationery outline that you could print it out and write on. That is totally optional. If you would rather type it on your computer and just write "one day at a pond" and write your sentences, that's also fine. Or if you just want to use like just lined paper and take a picture and send it to me via Google Classroom, whatever works. I know my printer's not even working right now, so the stationery really doesn't matter. It's just, if you would like to use that would also work. And then make sure you send me your story through Google Classroom. It could be a picture, writing, or typed on your computer. so that I could read your story, and I cannot wait to read about your day at the pond. And I'm just going to say, make sure to include the following components, at least one stage we learned about, so the egg or tadpole stage. And then I challenge you to use both. I didn't use both in mine, but you could use both in yours. Again, totally optional. At least 3 to 5 sentences. So when telling a story, obviously, it needs to be 3 minimum to actually tell somewhat of a story. 5 would probably be better, but if you're struggling, 3 is completely fine. And then try to use proper capitalization and punctuation. I know sometimes it's hard, but just go back to your writing. I know Mrs. and Jetta had those tools where you could check, so just try to mentally check since we don't have those in front of us. And then my last requirement is to make it fun and interesting, because I've loved reading your stories before. You guys have such amazing and funny thoughts, and I would love to see what you guys have to say about that. And yeah, just to reiterate, send it any way you want, and I'm really, really excited to read them. So that will be all for today. Yeah, so then we'll be back. I'll be back some point next week with another lesson.